Focus on Headline. Hello, everyone. Well, now, before we delve into some of our issues, I just want to mention all the people chiming in today, including Benny, who already knew that I was the special host filling in for your host, SJ Lee. And we have Paulina, Chris, Sangmin Park, and many more chiming in. Thank you for chiming in once again. And we'll dive straight into the major issues today. We have our reporters Yoon Hae-jung and Kim Min-ji in the studio, and I realized we're all alumni or graduates from the same graduate school. Yeah, what a combination, right? All right, so what is our first news headline today? Let's take a look. So we begin with domestic politics. Today, President Yoon Suk Yeol made a significant announcement that could place the country at the forefront of this new AI era. He's unveiled an ambitious plan aimed at transforming South Korea into one of the world's top 3 AI powerhouses by 2027. Now, this national initiative marks a turning point for the country's technological and economic future. So, Min-ji, you have more on this.
Sure. So President Yoon Suk Yeol announced this bold initiative today on the 26th at a special event in Seoul, marking the launch of the National AI Committee. He emphasized that AI is becoming a core factor in determining national power and economic growth, and he called this transition crucial for South Korea's future competitiveness. In response to this, the newly formed National AI Committee is expected to play a pivotal role in driving the country's AI development efforts. President Yoon will personally chair the committee, which will include 30 civilian AI experts and 10 government ministries. So the aim is to bring together national capabilities in AI to accelerate both public and private sector investment and development. The president also highlighted the importance of building a national AI computing center through public-private cooperation to foster AI innovation across industries and society as a whole. And in terms of regulatory policies, he mentioned that while protecting core values like copyright and personal data privacy, it remains essential, but it's equally important to prevent such regulations from hindering innovation. He committed to improving these regulations to ensure a balanced approach alongside a robust strategy covering research and development, infrastructure, and legal systems. He also raised concerns about growing risks of digital divide, fake news, and deepfake technology misuse, stating that these issues threaten democratic values. In response, South Korea has been at the forefront of addressing these problems at the international level, and this includes the 2022 New York Initiative and more recently the Seoul Declaration, developed during the AI Seoul Summit in May, which outlined key principles of safety, innovation, and inclusion for AI technology. Now, on the global stage, the president pointed to ongoing initiatives like the Korea-US AI Working Group and the Global AI Frontier Lab, both launched after the Korea-US Summit, where the two nations are working together to lead in AI research and development. So it's clear that South Korea is gearing up for a significant AI-driven transformation, with President Yoon pushing for the country to lead in not just AI, but also the AI semiconductor market through initiatives launched earlier this year. So with this national effort, South Korea aims to be a key player in the global AI race.
Right. So I think all this ambitious plan is very welcoming, but when it comes to AI technology, privacy violation, and it being used for crimes, including fake news, should be addressed, which is why we held that AI Safety Summit recently. And also when a problem occurs by an AI, we also need to think about the legal liabilities, should have guidelines for that. And I think we're all working towards coming up with those structures.
So now, I do think that you need a balanced approach between the development and the regulations.
Right.
It's not easy at all.
Right. We're still at the beginning stage, but hopefully we're heading towards the right direction. Moving on, lawmakers discussed and voted on some 70 livelihood bills at the National Assembly this afternoon, including one that outlines the penalty for possessing and watching products of deepfake sex crimes. This, another one, is a crime using AI, of course. And Hae-jung, what do we know so far? I believe you have updates as well.
Right. In today's National Assembly plenary session, bills on deepfake crimes, parental leaves, and And the 4 broadcasting bills were just few of the many bills that were up for discussion and voting today. Now, first, the bill on imposing a prison sentence for knowingly possessing or viewing deepfake sex porn passed a parliamentary committee on Wednesday yesterday. And the revised act calls for punishing people possessing, purchasing, storing, or viewing deepfake sexual materials and other fabricated videos with up to 3 years in prison or a fine up to 30 million won, or roughly $22,500. And in today's plenary session, the amendment to the Sexual Crimes Punishment Act was put to a vote. Also, the revision to the existing act on equal employment and work-family balance, which extends the period of parental leave for after childbirth and for child care, was also put to a vote. Now, the amendment would increase the duration of parental leave to 3 years from the current 2 years, and a spouse's parental leave to 20 days from the current 10 days. Now, there was also some revoting on bills that were previously tabled in the plenary session by the opposition party's lead, but had returned to the National Assembly as President Yoon Suk Yeol vetoed the bill. This includes the 4 broadcasting bills, the pro-labor yellow envelope bill, and the bill to hand out 250,000 won cash vouchers to all Koreans. Now, in order for the bill to be vetoed by the president and to pass in a revote at the National Assembly's plenary session, at least 2/3 of the lawmakers present at the session must vote in favor. But in today's session, all of these bills were scrapped as they were voted down.
Right, so much effort for all this being
Right, it was
scrapped.
pretty much expected. I mean, it's not something that we see. It's something that we often see. The DP tables a bill that was very contentious. It's vetoed and then put to a revote and then scrapped again, and then we go through that all over again.
True. Well, moving on then, in just a few weeks, Seoul will hold a by-election for the position of Superintendent of Education, and it's shaping up to be a significant ideological battle, and we've talked about this before as well. Now, both the conservative and progressive blocs have now selected their candidates, with candidate filings happening today and campaigning set to officially begin on the 3rd of next month. Now, Minji has the latest on who will be competing in this race and what we can expect in the coming weeks.
Well, this by-election for the Seoul Superintendent of Education is scheduled for October 16th, and both the conservative and progressive blocs have now finalized their candidates, setting the stage for a heated contest. On the conservative side, Cho Jun-hyuk, a former National Assembly member, has been selected as their unified candidate. Cho is known for his strong conservative views and expected to focus on policies aimed at improving academic performance and reducing private education costs. His platform will also emphasize protecting teacher rights and expanding after-school care programs, and these priorities reflect a broader push by the conservative bloc to shift away from the education policies of the past decade, which leaned more towards student rights and progressive initiatives under former superintendents. Now, on the other hand, the progressive bloc has nominated Jung Geun-sik, an honorary professor from Seoul National University, as their candidate, and Jung is likely to continue the policies established under former Superintendent Jo Hee-hyun, with a focus on democratic civil education and innovation in schools. And his platform also includes restoring Seoul's innovative education districts and expanding local educational governance by involving students, teachers, parents, and local communities. Now, additionally, given his background with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, he is expected to emphasize strengthening history education as a core part of his agenda. Now, both candidates will officially filed their paperwork today, and the campaigning is set to begin next week on October 3rd. And the stakes are high, as this election will not only decide who leads Seoul's education system, but also signal broader ideological shifts. And Jo's platform leans toward academic competition and conservative values, while Jung represent continuity with progressive education policies that emphasize inclusivity and community involvement.
Right. So like you said, it's not just about who leads the education system of Seoul, but it's a bigger ideological shift. So
right.
we'll look for the updates and pay attention to what's going to come in the following weeks. Moving on, some more domestic issues. Leaders of the main opposition Democratic Party and Rebuilding Korea Party are racing to win the October 16th by-election for Koksong and Yeonggwang in Jeollanam-do Province. And Haejong, you have the latest on this.
Right. Going back to the April 10th general election, the Rebuilding Korea Party had topped the proportional representation vote in the Honam region, while the main opposition Democratic Party has been had a traditionally political stronghold in the Honam region. Now, the October by-election is the first election since the April general election to test public sentiment in local areas, and it's also a prelude to the local election in 2026. Now, it will also be the first time that the DP and the Rebuilding Korea Party, which had a win-win relationship during the last general election, will face off in local areas. For the DP, it's the first election since the party leader Lee Jae-myung's second term as the party leader. And according to political sources on Wednesday, Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung wrapped up his 3-day election campaigning in Busan, and Rebuilding Korea Party leader Cho Guk has been renting a place in Koksong and Yeonggwang for a month, staying there for the party's election campaign. So he was very invested. Now, the reason why these two leaders are so focused in the Koksong and Yeonggwang by-election is because although it is a small election to elect 4 heads of local governments, it serves as a barometer to check the public sentiment for the upcoming local elections and to win the votes in the Honam region. And although the Democratic Party traditionally had a good grasp of the voters in the Honam region, some recent polls have showed that the Rebuilding Korea Party has caught up very close. Now, if the Democratic Party loses in Honam, it could chip away at the party's stronghold in the province. The party may not be able to guarantee a sweeping victory in the upcoming local elections if the Rebuilding Korea Party is able to gain a stronger presence.
Right. Moving on to some economic news. As the South Korean government faces a second consecutive year of a significant tax revenue shortfall, concerns are growing about the country's fiscal stability and its ability to effectively manage economic downturns. Now, the tax revenue gap is being compounded by sluggish domestic consumption, and this financial strain could have lasting impacts on everything from local government projects to long-term national priorities. So, Minji, you have the latest update.
Sure. So the South Korean government is now expecting a tax revenue shortfall of 29.6 trillion Korean won, or about $22 billion this year, following a similar shortfall last year of over 50 trillion Korean won, or $38 billion So this brings the 2-year total to over 80 trillion Korean won, or $61.5 billion in missed revenue. So the shortfall is largely due to poor corporate performance, which has driven down corporate tax income, and other contributing factors include tax reductions aimed at stabilizing fuel prices and supporting households. The government plans to cover the shortfall as much as possible through the unused funds and by suspending projects that cannot be executed. However, there are no concrete solutions yet, and concerns are rising about the potential impact on the national budget. In fact, there are already discussions about possibly freezing or delaying some budget items. So this situation is compounded by external challenges like rising global uncertainties, including instability in the Middle East and the growing trend of protectionism in the United States. What makes this even more critical is the role fiscal policy plays in stimulating the economy during downturns. Now, for example, the retail sales index, a key indicator of domestic consumption, has been falling for 9 consecutive quarters, and this highlights ongoing weakness in domestic spending. The gap between small and medium-sized enterprises and large corporations is also widening, with small and medium-sized businesses seeing production levels drop to lows not seen since 2020. And despite growth in large corporations, this divergence is a concern for the overall economy. And as a result, the government's ability to inject funds into the economy is limited, which could also undermine long-term projects like addressing the low birth rate and boosting research and development investments.
Right. Usually towards the end of the year, the remaining budget is used for like different projects and conferences, etc. But it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. And it sounds like the effects of this shortfall could ripple across several sectors. What about the government's forecasts then? We've heard that past projections haven't matched reality. Could this happen again?
Yes, that's exactly the problem. And the government has faced criticism for overly optimistic about economic forecasts in recent years. And in both 2021 and in 2022, the government overestimated tax revenue, leading to huge surpluses. But now with tax revenue falling short 2 years in a row, there's skepticism about the accuracy of the government's forecast going forward. The Ministry of Economy and Finance has pledged to analyze the causes and improve future projections, but many still remain doubtful, especially since they're still predicting an increase in corporate tax revenue next year.
Well, moving on, according to Seoul's finance ministry on Wednesday, the OECD lowered this year's growth outlook for the South Korean economy from 2.6% to 2.5%. And Haejong, you have more on this.
Right. The OECD Interim Economic Report Outlook released on Wednesday projected a GDP growth of 2.5% for South Korea's economy in 2024. The latest figure marks a 0.1 percentage point fall from the organization's projection presented in May and is on a par with the forecasts by the International Monetary Fund and the Asian Development Bank. Meanwhile, the South Korean government expected a 2.6% expansion, and the Bank of Korea forecasted a 2.4% growth this year. The OECD expects growth to be stable in Korea this year on the back of exports being powered by global semiconductor demand. Exports rose for the 11th consecutive month in August to reach $57.9 billion as exports of chips jumped 38.8% on year to $11.9 billion, which was the highest volume for any August ever. And the OECD's projection for next year's growth rate remained the same as their previous outlook, which was 2.2%. In the meantime, the organization lowered its forecast for inflation in South Korea this year to 2.4% from the previous projection of 2.6%, while maintaining the figure for the next year at 2%. The consumer price inflation has been in the 2% range in Korea for 5 consecutive months after falling to 2.9% in April. As for the global economy, the OECD forecasts global economic growth to stand at 3.2% this year, which is up 0.1 percentage point from its previous forecast. The inflation forecast was lowered by 0.5 percentage points to reach 5.4%. As major challenges to the global economy, the organization mentioned geopolitical risks and the subsequent trade tension, as well as low growth potential and excessive volatility in the financial market over the course of easing inflation. The OECD recommended nations to decide when and how much to cut interest rates based on data, keeping in consideration inflation as well as labor market conditions. It also called for decisive efforts to ensure debt sustainability and better manage state finances with long-term perspectives.
And also in the economic front, South Korea has taken a major step in expanding its trade partnerships, this time focusing on a Balkan nation. Now, the government has announced its intention to form an economic partnership agreement, or the EPA, with Serbia. This would be the first agreement of its kind between South Korea and a country in the Balkans. So, Minji, you have more on this.
Yes, so South Korea is pushing to establish an economic partnership agreement with Serbia, which is a significant development as it is the first time South Korea has sought such a trade agreement with a Balkan country. Now, this agreement, known as an EPA, is similar to the free trade agreement, but it also emphasizes cooperation that can benefit both parties in key areas beyond simple tariff eliminations. So while it's generally viewed as a lower level agreement compared to the FTA, the EPA will still play a crucial role in expanding bilateral ties. Now, Serbia holds strategic importance in the Balkan Peninsula and southeastern Europe with abundant resources like lithium and zinc, and this has caught the attention of the South Korean government, which sees great potential for cooperation, particularly in advanced industries like batteries and electric vehicles, where Serbia's lithium resources can be a valuable asset. Now, additionally, Serbia has been experiencing rapid growth, especially in its manufacturing sector, and it's emerging as a key production base in Europe, and this makes it an important partner for South Korea in terms of strengthening economic cooperation with Korean mobility companies, including auto part manufacturers, already active in the Serbian market. Now, moreover, Serbia's government is pursuing the development of nuclear power, positioning the country as a potential future partner for South Korea's nuclear energy industry. As Serbia looks to introduce nuclear energy, South Korea could play a significant role in that development. And this year marks the 35th anniversary of diplomatic relations between South Korea and Serbia, and the EPA is expected to lay the groundwork for future cooperation in areas like automobiles, advanced technologies, renewable energy, and nuclear power.
I see. It's good that we're diversifying our partnerships to reduce reliance on just one single country or a small group of countries for getting any key materials needed for our
I think everyone kind of experienced that during the COVID-19 and the energy crisis and whatnot.
That's right. Well, now moving on to some diplomatic and international news. On the sidelines of the ongoing UN General Assembly meetings in New York, North Korean defectors shared their stories having to leave their family behind in Pyongyang, denouncing North Korea's human rights abuses. Now, Haejong, give us the details.
Right. The Korea Society in New York, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting better understanding between the people of the U.S. and Korea, organized a North Korean human rights seminar on Wednesday local time. Here, a North Korean defector shared her story on how she brought the remains of her late father back to South Korea, who died in North Korea as a prisoner of war, but said her remaining family members in Pyongyang have been sent to political prison camps. Another North Korean defector currently living in the UK pointed out Pyongyang's deplorable human rights conditions, people being tortured and detained in prison camps and being executed. South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol, who attended the event, stressed that North Korea's human rights violations in the modern world is the most in terms of severity and scale, and highlighted that this is an issue that demands urgent attention from the international community. In the meantime, also on Wednesday, during an open debate on leadership for peace on the sidelines of the ongoing UN General Assembly meetings, Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol pointed out limitations of the UN Security Council in effectively addressing pressing security issues, citing North Korea's transfers of weapons to Russia in breach of relevant UNSC resolutions. The minister described Russia's war efforts as a blatant breach of core principles of the UN Charter and international humanitarian law, and denounced its alleged use of North Korean munitions. He said, quote unquote, adding to the frustration is the fact that the Russian Federation obtains arms and munitions from North Korea in flagrant violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions while using its veto power to undermine the international non-proliferation regime. The foreign minister also added that considering the interests of permanent members of the Security Council, which is the US, the UK, France, China, and Russia, the role of elected non-permanent members like South Korea Hezbollah is becoming increasingly important. The South Korean foreign minister underscored the need to advance efforts to address the underlying causes of regional and global conflicts, adding that many of today's humanitarian challenges, ranging from poverty and the refugee crisis to resource allocation, are interlinked to security and development. Therefore, he emphasized that tackling the root causes requires an integrated and coherent approach that links humanitarian assistance and development to peace and security.
Right. We'll be delving in more depth, exploring some of the key issues being discussed at this UN assembly later on in the second hour. So please stay tuned. And moving on, the tensions in the Middle East is continuing to escalate as both Israel and Hezbollah engage in increasingly aggressive military actions. On September 24th, Hezbollah fired a ballistic missile towards Tel Aviv, marking a major escalation in the conflict. Now, this follows a series of airstrikes by Israel as both sides appear to be preparing for the possibility of a larger conflict. And we've recently had those pagers and walkie-talkies exploding as well. And so, Minji, you have more on the details on this intensifying situation.
That's right. So the situation between Israel and Hezbollah took a significant turn on September 24th when Hezbollah launched a ballistic missile aimed at Tel Aviv, targeting what they claim to be the headquarters of the Mossad, which is Israel's foreign intelligence agency. Now, this marks the first time Hezbollah has targeted Tel Aviv with such missiles since the Gaza conflict erupted last year, and it is the first time they have used a ballistic missile in this ongoing conflict. So the missile launch appears to be in retaliation for a series of explosions in Lebanon on September 17th and 18th, which Hezbollah attributes to sabotage involving their communication devices, which resulted in the deaths of over 37 people. Now, Israel responded quickly, activating air raid sirens in Tel Aviv and central Israel while intercepting the missile with its air defense systems. So Israel's military retaliated by launching airstrikes on Hezbollah positions in Lebanon, and these airstrikes are part of Israel's ongoing, the so-called Northern Arrow operation, which has been targeting Hezbollah strongholds in the southern Lebanon and the Bekaa Valley for the past 3 days. Now, as part of this operation, the Israeli military claims to have struck more than 280 Hezbollah targets, including fighters, weapon depots, and rocket launchers, while also targeting intelligence facilities. Now, there are growing signs that Israel is preparing for ground operations. Israeli military leadership, including the chiefs of staff, visited units near the border with Lebanon and indicated that airstrikes are setting the stage for further military maneuvers, possibly suggesting an upcoming ground invasion into Hezbollah-controlled areas. Now, in Lebanon, the conflict has already taken a heavy toll. Lebanese health officials reported that more than 615 people have been killed and over 2,000 injured since the escalation began on September 23, and with 51 of those casualties occurring in a single day during Israel's airstrike on September 24th. So as the situation worsens, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu postponed his planned trip to New York for the United Nations General Assembly, and he actually chose instead to hold a security cabinet meeting in Israel. So right now, there are about 140 Koreans living in Lebanon, around 80 in Beirut, and 40 in the Bekaa region, but about 20 spread across other areas. Now, thankfully, no one has been harmed yet, but the government is really urging everyone to leave as soon as commercial flights become available, and the government is also thinking about other means to transport the Koreans and these places back into Korea safely so that they will not be harmed by the airstrikes going in this region.
Right. Well, when it comes to history, every country's history, every region's history is really difficult, but the Middle East issues are always the most complicated. Yeah, and although I'm not an expert in history or do I have a deep knowledge in this area, I do know that this has been an ongoing thing. It's not new between Israel and Hezbollah. It's been over 40 plus years. And from what I know, like back in 1978, Israel tried to sweep the PLO, or the Palestinian Liberation Organization, in Lebanon. And even though they left the region, Israel kept trying to invade even to Beirut. And that's when Hezbollah was formed to combat and stand against Israel. And Iran started backing up Hezbollah as well, because they're not in good terms with Israel. But the thing is, the focus seems to have moved from Hamas to Hezbollah, and we're wondering why that is so. But some say that it could be a political shift in strategy, because after this has been, the whole conflict has been kind of shifted to Hezbollah after Hamas, the approval ratings of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has gone up. So there are a lot of complicated political, I guess, dynamics behind that. But anyhow, I really hope that all these ongoing wars would end very soon, because we're seeing a lot of casualties in just single day.
Well, it seems like a tit for tat situation right now, because one thing comes up, the other retaliates, and no one's goes giving back in. And forth. So I think it's very unfortunate this is actually happening right now in this 21st century.
I know. And it's one of the two wars that's ongoing right now. And just to mention one thing from our listeners, Jack Kim has written something about our new economic ties between South Korea and Serbia. And I think he's like studying English really well with what he's been hearing from our corner here. Because he wrote like play a key role in. He wrote some Korean and then wrote this English expression, which I think he heard from your report, Minji. Yeah, it's good that people are listening to our show to improve their English. Yeah? All right. Well, moving on to our last piece from the international news. Russian President Vladimir Putin has officially announced a revision of Russia's nuclear doctrine, which includes the principles of nuclear weapons use. Now, it's being interpreted as a strong warning to the West over a potential approval of Ukraine's use of long-range weapons. Now, Haejung, you have more on this.
Right. In what is being considered a strong warning against the West, Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced that he will be making revisions to Moscow's nuclear doctrine. Speaking during Russia's Security Council meeting, the Russian leader announced a set of revisions, which include a stipulation that an attack against Russia by a non-nuclear power country with the support of a nuclear power country will be seen as a joint attack on Russia. While Putin did not specify if such an action would be met with the nuclear response, he stressed that Moscow could use nuclear weapons in response to conventional attacks that pose a critical threat to the country. Now, Russia's nuclear doctrine stipulates that nuclear weapons can be used in the event of an enemy nuclear attack or conventional weapons attack that threatens the country's existence. And Russia has already hinted on several occasions at the possibility of revising its nuclear doctrine in response to Western arms support for Ukraine, which it claims is a serious threat to security. Now, specifically, Putin has cited the emergence of new threats for revising the nuclear doctrine, and the idea is to revise the provisions governing the use of nuclear weapons in the event of any threat to reflect the changes in the security environment. Now, the recent changes means that even if a non-nuclear weapon state uses conventional weapons, but if the attack is supported by a nuclear weapon state, Moscow will still consider all of them as aggressors. Now, the change appears to significantly lower the threshold for Russia to use atomic weapons and comes as Ukraine's Western allies consider whether to allow Kyiv to use longer-range missile weapons to strike military targets deep inside Russia, which comes a month after Kyiv launched a surprise incursion into Russia's Kursk region. Now, Putin made specific references to long-range weapons that could potentially be used by Ukraine if Western countries give Kyiv the green light. According to the Russian president, such weapons include strategic and tactical aircraft, cruise missiles, drones, hypersonic, and other flying vehicles, adding that the use of these weapons could be met with a nuclear response.
Well, this reminds me of the updated version of North Korea's nuclear use law. A couple of years ago, where they said they will exponentially increase the country's nuclear weapons and development of ICBMs.
Right.
And I mean, we're seeing wars going on already. We don't want any more tensions and building up of these nuclear power or forces a lot more,
Really,
especially between Russia and North Korea.
Yeah, it's really concerning because it seems that Russia and North Korea has partnered up to some extent, and then they're obviously going to promote the nuclear weapon system. And I think it's a threat to the entire international community.
Of
but
course.
It's time for us to, partner up more for the allies to, respond to these kind of threats. But I don't think it's a very easy situation right now.
Right. They're heading in the same direction as partner countries. But anyhow, that's it for today's Focus on Headline. Once again, thank you, Minji and Haejung, for your good news. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang radio application or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.